Hello, this is Tales of Dread. Tonight we're going to tell you some stories about national parks. So have fun, but don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's move on to the stories now. I recently learned something shocking about our government, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with it. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to be noticed, but it's been bothering me. I think this is something everyone should hear. My dad was in the military his whole life, so he was rarely home when I was growing up. Because of this, I never really felt close to him when he was there. He always looked very serious, and he spent most of the day by himself in his study. Mom told me to never bother him. He tried to get some rest. So, as I grew up, I didn't really know much about my dad. I'm in my 50s now, and my mum died of cancer 5 years ago. After she died, I only had my dad left. I've tried to find something we had in common over the past few years, but it's always been hard. He didn't rebuff me. He didn't say a word. Whenever I came to visit, I always left earlier than I had planned. I felt like I was getting in his way. His health went from bad to worse. He was told he had pancreatic cancer 8.5 months ago, and he didn't have much time left. I did more to make sure I was there. He even told me some things about his childhood that I had never heard before, but they weren't important. But it was nice to hear him talk to me about the past like a normal dad. I'm grateful. We finally got to know each other a little better before he died. He chose to spend his last days at home 42 days ago. I took time off from work so I could be with him when he died. He was on morphine and kept falling asleep and waking up for 3 days. When he was awake, he seemed to be very clear-headed. His eyes were straight ahead, and his words seemed to have been chosen with care. I mean to say that what he told me during this time wasn't the ramblings of a man on drugs. He told me that he needed to talk about some of the things he had done in his life. Things he told me before that he wanted me to know. The time had run out. My dad told me he was in a secret government group called the 4E. It was this branch's job to look at threats to US citizens from places we don't know about. Get rid of these threats and do whatever it takes to get rid of the incidents. So, in a race for E for entity, evaluate and get rid of. He said that if people in this country knew what was living among them, there would be a mass uprising against the government. Chaos. The stock market would fall, and crime would go up. The faith of people in God would be hurt. Even though I don't agree, my dad said that he always lived by the idea that we should do things to protect our country and way of life. Here are some of the things he said have happened. There is an underground base in Colorado where several aliens were taken alive from a UFO crash site in 1986. The government is looking for a way to talk to them. They also check for resistance to diseases that affect the whole world. Dad said that he had seen a drugged alien that was locked up in a lab and kept there. He said it was grey and had short, skinny arms and legs, an oval head, and big eyes, just like the pictures you see. He told me that they had to give the creatures something to keep them under control because their minds can move solid things. But he didn't say anything more about that. Dad also said that the government knows about the animals that live in the national forest. He told me that people think they've been there since the beginning of time, and that even though over 6,000 of them have been killed between 1948 and 1995, the population is still thought to be around 10,000. Okay, I just couldn't believe that. He said that Strong Arm Park rangers had called him several times to tell him that they wanted people to know about these creatures. He had to tell several park employees that they could lose their jobs and be charged with treason if they told. I think my dad felt bad about that part because he went on and on about it, threatening the rangers. I mean, the last thing he told me was that there was a creature that had gotten out of a government lab in the 1960s and learned to live in swamps and sewers. He told me about it, and it sounded like a rape thing. People talk about a humanoid with a big head, black eyes, and no nose. It is very pale and moves around on all fours. It goes very quickly. He said that one of the most scary things about 4E was that it ate people. It looked like one had killed and eaten part of the other. When it got away, it was being studied by one of the doctors. So, the people who lived in the wild and had babies were thought to be a real threat to people. I was shocked to hear all of this, but if you look right into his eyes, you can tell he is telling the truth. I know that what he said was true. He was very clear-headed. Dad was afraid to say anything until he was on his deathbed, but he was worried about all of these animals because he thought they were dangerous to people. He told me it was dangerous for me to go anywhere near the wild parts of the country. He said that a lot of people go missing in national parks, but when the four comes in and says that one of these animals is to blame, the story is kept quiet. If a body is found, word gets out before they can try to hide it. People say it was a bear or mountain lion, but if someone just goes missing and they think it was one of these animals, they keep it quiet and the story never gets out. So I hope that what I'm doing is right. I know my dad struggled with whether or not to tell the truth, but lately all I can think is that it's always best to tell the truth. May he finally be at peace. I live in northern Michigan in a very suburban area. It's really no different from any other neighborhood. We chose the house because it was on a cul-de-sac and safe for the kids to play outside. Also, the back of the house backed up to a natural open space area so we could take the kids on nature walks. When we moved in, we didn't know that our neighbor to the west seemed a bit crazy. He was always afraid of everything. He had a lot of lights with motion sensors on his house, and his window blinds were always shut. He even had a piece of barbed wire on top of the fence in his backyard. When I met him for the first time, he was putting salt around his house. He was carrying Epsom bag of coarse salt. We hadn't even met yet, and he was already trying to give me some salt. He said that you could never predict when the hornbeast would return. I thought he might be a religious fanatic who was talking about the devil, but he said that he had seen its footprints in his backyard the last time it snowed, and that was when he put up the barbed wire. So it seemed like he was talking about a real animal. I tried to ask him some questions, but he said it wasn't good to talk about it too much. I don't like to judge, but I thought he had lost a few of his marbles. Some of my own family members have gotten a little strange when they were stuck inside for too long. One night, I was cooking dinner and doing dishes in the kitchen. When I heard a low rumbling sound, I turned around and saw my 60-pound bull terrier growling like I'd never seen him do before. He was facing the door to the backyard. His hair stood straight up, and his body was stiff and shaking. His lips were curled, and all of his teeth were in his mouth. He was snarling and taking in these big breasts. I've never seen him like that before. I had seen him bark and scold cats in the neighborhood, but this was different. He has a lot of muscle, and he looked very scary. I thought, what the hell is out there? Since I was home alone, no one should have been there. I got a big knife from the kitchen and opened the door a little. I could smell rotting meat as soon as the door was about halfway open. I couldn't think of a reason why. I started to wonder if the trash can's lids had been blown off, but trash cans couldn't smell that bad. I hadn't put anything like that in them, though. It really did smell bad. I thought it would be best to go outside and see if an animal was stuck in my yard. I didn't want it to cause any damage. My poor dog had to settle down. It was getting close to dusk, so I could still see a little bit, but it was almost completely dark. When I stuck my head out the door, I heard leaves rustling and branches breaking. I looked toward the back fence and thought I saw antlers. There were a lot of deer in the area, and they were often out at dusk, so I didn't think anything was strange. The noise of rustling kept going on, so I thought maybe its antlers were stuck in the fence. I didn't think I could free a trapped deer, but I also couldn't ignore it, especially since my dog was going crazy, which was strange because he saw deer all the time. Before I called animal rescue, I wanted to get a better look in case I was wrong. I managed to get out the door without letting the dog out, but when I got outside, the dog went even crazier. He was actually jumping up and clawing at the door like he was trying to break it down. That should have been a clue because that's not how my dog acts. He's a big, funny fool. My backyard goes uphill to the back fence, which is about 60 feet from the back door. So I started walking up, and when I was about 20 feet away, I just stopped. Even though it had antlers, it wasn't a deer. This antler head turned toward me and looked at me with these horrible yellow eyes. The eyes seemed to be glowing out of these hollow sockets, and the head looked like some kind of skull. It looked like it had deer legs, but it was standing straight up and was at least 7 or 8 feet tall. It was so thin and didn't look real, but I'm telling you, it was real. When it looked at me, even though it wasn't that cold outside, I felt hollowed out and icy cold. Somehow, without hope, I was able to run back to the house after I turned around. I opened the door and had to use all my strength to keep my dog from running in. Then I slammed and locked the door. I just dropped to the ground and grabbed my dog. He kept lunging at me and barking. but I just held on to him very tightly. He finally calmed down after about 5 minutes. I turned on the floodlights in the backyard and looked out the window. It looked like it was gone. I couldn't even believe that I didn't know anything about that. Do you know what this thing is? This one might be a little different from the others. That's because I've been watching these ships for a while, and I'm sure I've been learning about an alien species. This might sound crazy, and my family would agree, but I have a lot of proof that could convince even the most stubborn person not to believe. I live in New Mexico, which is close to the border with Mexico. I won't tell you specifics, but I can tell you where it is. It's not a very populated area, and other than the highway and a few rest stops, there's not much out there. I have a day job that I won't tell you about, but I mostly look into things at night. Since it's hot and dry here, it's much easier to look around when the sun isn't out. If you don't, you could get a bad sunburn and lose a lot of water. I've been making plans for how 2 spacecraft will fly. The first is a hovering square-shaped ship that stays close to the ground. It can duck in and out and turn and flip. At first, you might have thought it was a drone, but neither government nor hobby drones have the ability to disappear into thin air. It does exactly that. It will fly around the desert and close to where I live, and then speed up. It will flash a bright blue neon light, then go away. It always starts in the same place, and at 3 a.m. I followed it for about a mile. It always goes away, but sometimes it will just blink away before that. If I can't keep up with my car on foot, I can sometimes lose it, but it moves pretty slowly most of the time. This second spacecraft is a lot bigger and harder to keep an eye on. It looks more like a classic UFO. I try not to use that phrase because the media and government have twisted it so much, but it looks more like what most people think of as an alien ship. And you know what? There must be a reason why so many people in New Mexico, Texas, and Nevada have seen these ships. Because this flight path is set up so that it connects to the equator's gravitational pull. I can talk more about this idea when no one is around. The ship goes from east to west, and I've worked out that it's going about 15 Meph. Sometimes it stops for a second when a car goes by or an animal walks by, but most of the time it keeps going at a steady pace. The ship flies at a much lower altitude than an airplane, which makes this effect behind it. There's nothing like a chemtrail or anything. It leaves behind only a small wave of heat or a change in the force of gravity. The first time I saw it, I was outside around 2 in the morning, taking my dog to the bathroom. When I looked up, I saw it. This round craft can only be seen around its edges, where a ring of LED lights shines on it. In the coming weeks, I would set my alarm for 1:50 in the morning. After that, go outside. I don't know if these ships are friends or foes. All I can do is guess. But the nearby government bases are interesting to look at. On their radar, they would definitely be able to see these ships. So I don't know why there haven't been any stories about their presence yet. When I saw the first ship for the first time, I posted about it on Twitter and Reddit in less than a day. But all of my accounts were shut down. I won't show any photos to the public. I do, however, have a few pictures I could show you. The Jersey Devil is something that everyone in Jersey knows about. Well, I don't know much about today's young people. They don't seem to care about anything that isn't on the internet. Not me. I grew up in the Pine Barrens in Hampton, New Jersey. So when I was a kid, I heard that Hamilton is the blueberry capital of the world because there are so many blueberry plants there. It wasn't a very big town. My parents ran a diner where blueberry pancakes were the specialty. Big surprise. They ran it like a real mom and pop business. They put me to work as soon as I was tall enough to stand on a stool and wash dishes. Later, I would flip pancakes or wait tables. The Jersey Devil was sometimes talked about when old people got together to drink coffee. They said they heard it at night or saw it flying through the sky. People always told kids not to go into the forest because it could hurt them. We didn't listen, of course. I'd spent a lot of time out there riding my bike in the dirt with other kids my age. We sometimes stayed out until it got dark, but we never saw anything that looked like that thing. When an old man with a blurry black and white photo came into the diner, everyone looked at it, but all they could see was a bird in the night sky. There was a moon, but it didn't shine very brightly. After that, I didn't hear about the Jersey Devil for a long time. I continued to work at the diner until I joined the army for 2 years. When I got home, my parents had decided to stop working. They left for Florida, leaving me in charge of the diner. After I got married, my wife and I worked together to run it. My wife doesn't like to stay up late, so I usually close by myself. At that time, we don't get a lot of business. So, most nights it's just me, but there are a few regulars who come in, the late shift workers or people who are just bored. Then there are tourists or truck drivers going through town. I began to hear reports of sightings. Late at night, most people just heard a strange, loud screech. Some people saw something in the sky. I didn't take it too seriously most of the time, but since I hadn't heard about it in a long time, I thought it was interesting. Maybe I thought those old people had seen it, and that it had gone somewhere and then come back. Maybe it went past the pine barrens to the other side. About once a month, someone would come in with a story. This went on for maybe a year. I closed the diner like I always did one day. When I went outside, I heard something screech. So loud was it that it sounded like a plane. If a plane were a hawk or other angry bird. I looked all around, but all I could see was a quiet, empty street. By 8 o'clock, things were pretty much over at Hamilton's. We're open until 11, but only the bar down the street is open that late. I almost asked the bartender if he had heard anything. Most nights, Jack is the only one there, and he has trouble hearing. Still, I thought it was worth a shot, or maybe I was just thirsty. So, since it was Tuesday night, I walked over and asked for one. A couple were swinging together on the small dance floor near the jukebox, but no one else was there. I didn't think they could hear anything over Frank Sinatra's singing. I asked Jack if he heard a noise that sounded like a screech. So I asked him if he had heard anything new about the Jersey Devil lately. Several tales. He tells you not to trust him. I asked him to give me an example, and he said, well, you know, people see things in the sky and hear strange screams on the way back to my car. I didn't know what was going on. On the one hand, Jack didn't think there was anything to worry about, but on the other, he was hearing the same stories I was, which wasn't good. 2 nights later, I heard it while I was mopping the floor in the diner. I went out the back door this time. It sounded like a yelling freight train was going down the street at full speed. I just can't believe that no one else heard that. Maybe they found a way to explain it. I don't know why they thought it was a train, but when I looked up, I saw what looked like a flying dragon from a movie. It had the biggest wingspan of any bird or hawk I'd ever seen. I thought I should go back inside when the sound started up again, but I wanted to see what would happen. It flew toward the woods and finally landed behind some of those tall pines, out of sight. I heard it one last time, and the next day I did go back inside. I asked my wife and a few other people if they heard it. They all look a little bit scared. I think they knew what it was, but nobody wanted to say it. Since then, I've heard it a few more times and tried to picture it, but I haven't been able to do so yet. I've always been interested in the animals that live in this world. I thought this very large dog-like creature lived in Somerset, Maine, but I didn't see it until recently. I live on a farm with a few acres of land, and my only neighbours are about a mile away to the northeast. It's pretty lonely out here, and the only things you can do are hike, hunt, or fish. I chose to go fishing at the riverbank on this particular day. I had only been out there for about an hour when all of a sudden I heard this howling. Coyotes usually howl out here, but they have a higher pitched sound than whatever this was. The howl was deep and guttural, and it went on for what seemed like a minute. Now I'm sure I was the only one who heard it because I was way out in the middle of nowhere. It sounded pretty close. I thought it would be better for me to keep moving rather than face it. So, as I walked home, I started to pack up my gear and head back to the house. It kept getting louder and louder, and I couldn't stop hearing it. Now I was thinking that maybe it was a stray dog that followed me to get food, but even the biggest dogs don't howl like that, so I knew that wasn't it. I sped up and slammed the door behind me when I got into the house. Even though my walls are thin, I didn't hear much more howling after that, so I decided to clean my fish and start making dinner. As the sun was going down, I was cooking some oil and laughing to myself. After I finished eating, I sat down with my book and lazy boy. I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a growl from outside. I put down my book and went to the window. The porch lights were on, so I could see this beast staring back at me from the steps through the screen door. I'd left the door open to let a breeze in, so the only thing between me and this creature was a thin sheet of mesh. I was scared, so I tried to keep as still as I could. It was now on all fours and looked exactly like a huge wolf. I could see that its dark grey hair was standing up in tufts on its back and that its head was down. I moved to get to my seat and the things began to stand up. There were only 2 steps up to the porch and it crept up them. It walked on its own 2 legs. The thing had to be over 8 feet tall and its head was a huge mass. With its long snout, my eyes were fixed on its row of huge teeth and I held my breath as it moved closer and closer and closer. It looked through both of my porch windows, first the one on the left and then the one on the right, before coming back to center itself at the front door. It just sat there like a Doberman waiting for dinner and took a deep sniff. As it pulled its nose away from the mesh door, it left a drop of drool on the wire. I couldn't believe my eyes. If it wanted to, it could have scratched and broken right through the door. Even if the door was closed, those strong claws could have done damage to the wood frame. But I just sat there. Damn. I do think I was lucky because I don't know what would have happened if I had tried to run away or fight it. I think my instinct to freeze took over, and I just waited for it to pass. At last, a white-tailed deer began to walk across the lawn. I could see it from about 20 feet away, and I saw it before the wolf did, but as the wolf walked by, it lifted its head and snout into the air and took a whiff. It got up on its back legs and jumped into the air in an instant. I heard the deer squeal and the sound of their teeth grinding against each other. I quickly grabbed a poker from the fireplace and armed myself. When I went back outside, though, the creature and the deer were gone, leaving only a pool of blood on the lawn. I didn't sleep at all that night, so I went to my brother's house for the next few days. I'm very nervous about going back to my farm. That thing is definitely out there, and I worry that the next time I won't be so lucky, I'll end up like that doe. I really don't want to see that thing again. But if I ever go missing, I just want everyone to know that it was this wolf-like creature out here. I didn't always believe in ghosts, but my family and I moved into a haunted house without knowing it. The things I saw and did there changed the way I see the world forever. It's simple to say, there are no ghosts because it's hard to prove that they exist, but once you see one for yourself, there's no doubt about it. I not only felt like a ghost was there, but I also felt like it was threatening me and breaking the rules. I used to think that people who talked about strange things they had seen or heard were lying, but now I'm really interested in the paranormal. I couldn't tell you everything that happened in that house, but there are a few things I feel compelled to tell you, and maybe your audience as well. Spirits should not be upset or messed with. We should show them respect. Instead of denying that they exist, we need to learn how to live with them. We all thought this house was great when we first moved in. It was big enough for each child to have a room of their own. The kitchen was huge and the view was amazing. It was right by the harbour, so you could see lots of different kinds of boats coming and going. There were beautiful views of the ocean as far as the eye could see, and I'll never forget how good it smelled when you cracked the window. At first, my room was huge, and all around it, the wood was carved in the most beautiful ways. The first week we stayed there, we didn't even have beds, but I didn't care. I was so glad to finally have a room of my own. Slowly but surely we started moving furniture, and it started to feel like our home. Some of my fondest memories are from the first month we lived in that amazing house. One night my brother and I were playing, and we knocked over an old mirror off the wall, and it shattered all over the floor. My mom got angry with us and told us to go to bed for the rest of the night. I could hear my brother running up and down the hallway, and I was afraid that my mom would get mad at both of us, and that I would get in trouble for him. I timed him so. His footsteps were right outside my door, and I swung it open to smack him. I looked out into the hallway and saw that no one was there. I was sure that my brother had run into his room. I ran over to his door and opened it. I found him in bed, fast asleep and snoring. Then I heard the footsteps again, and when I looked, there was nobody. I remember that my hair stood up, which scared me. I went to bed and tried to just forget about it. When I woke up that night, this dark figure was leaning over me. I tried to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't move or breathe, and I felt like someone was holding me down with their hands on my chest. I tried very hard to make a noise, but all I could do was shake the bed. I was finally let go, and I yelled for my parents. They came in to see how I was doing, and told me I was having a nightmare. I told them it wasn't a dream, and that this dark figure was making me stay on the bed. They told me that ghosts and spirits don't exist. They told me it was just a bad dream and told me to go back to sleep. I stayed up all night and just looked at the foot of the bed. Not long after that, I heard my parents arguing about who left the tub running. Both of them say they never use the tub and only use the shower. This started to happen a lot, and soon every child in the family was getting blamed for leaving the tub running. One night, my dad was so mad that he turned off the water to the tub. A few minutes later, we were all in the bathroom arguing about who did it when the sink faucet turned on all by itself. We were all scared to death. My mother asked, "Who is it?" Right away, the sink faucet was turned on and the bathroom lights were turned off. After that, we all screamed and ran out of there because it was my birthday and we were having cake to celebrate. Mom told me to make a wish and then blow out all the candles. I made a wish and took a deep breath. Before I could blow out the candles on the cake, they all went out and the old candles on the mantel lit up. We all just sat there scared for a while and looked at the candles. Then my dad blew out the candles and we ate the cake while trying to act like nothing had happened. One night, my dad's yelling woke me up. Dad was shaking when we all ran into the room. We asked him what was wrong, but for a while he wouldn't say. He finally said that he went into the bathroom and saw the ghost of a woman calling to him from the bathtub. I told him that I didn't think ghosts were real. My dad told us to leave right away, so we did. Later, we looked up the house and found that a man who used to live there killed his 7 months pregnant wife by drowning her in the bathtub and then shooting himself in the head. The story was in the local papers. We were all taken aback. Pictures would fall off the wall and doors would be left open on the cabinets. Almost every day, doors would open and close on their own, and at different times of the day, you could hear footsteps, voices, and music all over the house. One day, I'd like to make a list of what my family and other people who lived there did and how they felt about it. It was crazy, and anyone who went there would become a believer. Let me know what you think of these stories in the comments section below.